Well, joining us now to discuss how government can develop a detailed action plan to recruit graduates and youth to the public service are the following guests: the spokesperson of the National Youth Development Agency, Lerato Gambu, recruitment specialist from Bahumi HR Consulting and practitioners, Tsietsi Mohlapeng, and joining us by phone is the Director for Public Service Human Resource Development Strategies at the Public Service and Administration Department, Zamo Khuzwayo. A very good evening to you all, and thank you so much for joining us.
Good evening.
Let me just start off with you, Mr. Gambu. Just talk to us about, I think Tsietsi first, the recruitment process.
Yes.
If you can just elaborate how the recruitment process actually works.
Okay. In terms of, especially for graduates, we're looking at what they're submitting in terms of their CVs. They need to be much more specific, much more detailed in what they applying for, on their CV. So that's when, that's going to help them to determine whether they are the right candidate or not. Because what they put on paper is taken into consideration highly so to determine whether they are the right candidates or not.
And if you just talk to us a bit about the NYDA's involvement, especially in this new launch that has taken place with the government. Is there some communication there? How will this actually help young people? Will they really aspire to work in the public sector? Because currently the private sector seems more lucrative and more desirable to be a part of than the public sector.
Firstly, let's begin by saying, as the National Youth Development Agency, we welcome the launch of the recruitment scheme. But we must say that first and foremost that the public sector is the most that is employing. And that's why this launch affords us an opportunity to also look into the private sector and ask a question: what is it that they are doing in terms of ensuring that young people are employed? But our view is that this employment scheme speaks to what the NDP wants and also the National Youth Policy, particularly focusing on absorption of young people into the employment. You would remember that you've got 3.3 million young people who are not in employment, education, or training, which is a ticking time bomb for us. So it is important that the scheme comes to life and all young people are employed by the public service. But we must say that as the NYDA would be using our offices in particular to ensure that this scheme is known. You'd know that the minister has indicated that they would be making sure that young people know about the scheme. So as the NYDA would also be using our platforms. You would remember that we are available on social media. Our offices across the country will be making sure that young people receive the information about the recruitment scheme.
Well, Zama, good evening to you and thank you for joining us. If you could actually elaborate for our viewers how exactly this recruitment scheme will be working, and if someone is sitting at home watching this and they want to be a part of the scheme, how do they get involved?
All right, good evening. I hope this is not giving you a feedback. Good evening to the colleagues also in the studio. Like it's already been mentioned, the graduate recruitment scheme for the public service flows from the National Development Plan recommendation that in order to make the public service a professional and efficient and the one that is able to respond to the needs of the citizens, we need to have, amongst other things, to make it a career of choice and to have a clearly defined, coordinated strategy that will be talking at how we attract the graduates that are qualified in technical and specialist professional skills, because that's who the government needs in order to be able to respond to the needs of the citizens. Now, what we desire to do is to ring-fence certain percentage of the prevailing vacancy rate in government departments to ensure that we utilize that to recruit graduates into permanent positions. Now, this is slightly different from your normal internships, which is mostly intended to give interns or youngsters an experience, which is very valuable, by the way, for their employability. But this time we want to target special skills that we require in departments. Now, what we want to do is also to work with other government departments to ensure that they set up similar schemes, because what we did, while doing a feasibility study, we recognized that there's several schemes that are taking place in government departments. However, they are less known because they are taking place in small pockets, and many unemployed graduates they are surprised in hearing that a certain department out there is running a particular scheme without actually knowing how to participate in it, and they've been eager to join the service and serve the people of the country. So the NYDA, as my colleagues have already said, they are our partners because they are the direct interface with the youth and the graduates out there. And we've got several departments that already have schemes, so we've agreed with them that we need to upscale these programs, that instead of taking few people whom they can afford, we need to partner and see how we can leverage on the, the economies of scale to expand, to increase, especially when you look at our municipalities as an example, where there's a great deal of shortage of people with technical skills. When you look at the service delivery departments, such as home affairs, such as hospitals, there again, we're running short of specialist professions. And so the first point, of course, is to start rolling it out in a manner that will ensure that more departments, they adopt it. In fact, it's not a matter of adopting because this is a directive from the executive. So the minister has already mentioned that we'll be engaging with her colleagues to see to it that this scheme is actually part of the broader recruitment in the public service to attract and sell the government as a career of choice. We wanted to have that prestige the same way as people feel when they work for the international companies or even some so-called developed countries' law enforcement agencies. I mean, you hear people saying FBI this, CIA this. In government, we also have similar functions that they do. It's just that it has not been known. So we want our youngsters to also feel the pride of serving their people.
Well, Zama, do stay with us on the phone, and as we come back to the studio, let me just come back to you, CSC. Do you think that internships are actually important, especially because you deal with people that try to get jobs, you help them put their CVs together? Is that work experience through internships actually important, and how easy is it to get internships, whether it's in the private or the public sector?
Okay, in terms of, it's very, very critical, for one's, future, for one's career, because this is an ideal stepping stone, because a young graduate will always be held against that they don't have any experience, So this definitely play an important role, towards their career, And then in terms of also launching within the corporate, launching within the corporate environment, whether corporate environment or public sector, this is one important tool, to let the graduates into the working world.
And just talk to us from the NYDA's perspective about the importance of internships, and also if you think that perhaps there should be a minimum wage for interns, because sometimes you find that government actually subsidizes private companies, to get them to absorb some interns that come out of varsity or colleges or technicons, and you find that perhaps for every 5,000 Rand that's supposed to be for one intern, they split it and actually hire two people. So, in terms of that exploitation aspect, should there be a minimum wage for interns?
The NYDA has been quite critical around the issues of internships and other learnerships programs, exactly on the same point that you are raising, that there is no minimum standard on how much to pay. But it's important to emphasize that the recruitment scheme deals with an important issue that the NYDA has been looking into. You'd remember that we are saying that the state is actually the highest employer, but the most important thing is that the retention rate is low. Young people would rather go and work for the private sector. So this program is actually bringing a certificate that young people will get through the schools of government that will teach them to be in senior management in government. So to us, it's quite commendable because it therefore says that you will see young people being director generals within the departments, unlike having a lot of them just being at the entry level. But we would remember that this speaks also to the call by the NYDA that we need to scrap experience as an entry requirement, because you're saying that we've got a lot of young graduates outside who cannot enter the job market because of this process. But because now this recruitment is coming as a scheme, I think that will speak. But in terms of all these other internship programs, we as the NYDA, we are in fact engaging with the Youth Employment Service to see to it how again can we agree in assisting young people who are in internship programs.
And just coming back to you, Mr. Zamo, talk to us about the importance of, bridging this whole experience issue that's just been raised by the NYDA, that obviously when people want to get employees, they want 2 years, 5 years, 10 years experience, but you've just come fresh from varsity with the theoretical knowledge. How are you supposed to get the practical knowledge if you don't get a job? Is it important to scrap that sort of aspect of employment for them to actually stop requiring you to have experience before they give you a chance to work?
Well, from our position, we wouldn't say scrap or not scrap. But what we do is that in the debate, we rather want to introduce a solution while the debate goes on, and the policymakers will ultimately decide whether to scrap it or not. Mm-hmm. But what we want to do, and what we are actually doing, coming back to the interventions we've made, let me start with the minimum stipend. And just now in May, the Minister for the Public Service and Administration, Honorable Minister Ayanda Hlodlo, issued a directive to all departments which extends the internship period, to align it with exactly what we would ordinarily ask for if you, as an experience, in order to be appointed permanently. But what we also did is that we set a minimum stipend amount and standardize it so that we do not get a situation like my colleagues have said of exploitation, where they would split a 5,000 rand just so that they can have more people. Now, when we implement an internship program in the public service, our approach is that you do not do it simply just because you're doing someone a favor. We move from a position that we are an employer. The public out there, they want to be served by a person who knows what he or she is doing. So that competence is critical. So in order for us to build that competency base, we need to ensure that we've got relevant people with the relevant skills. I'll make an example for you. If a company wanting to come to South Africa to invest, they would first say, do we have the skills in that country that will enable us to deliver the share value for our shareholders? If they don't, then how do we import? Or the organic approach, how do we develop the skill? Or if neither of those work, they disinvest and leave the country. But the government cannot do that, because government, for as long as there's a country, there will be a government and there will always be a public service. So our only option is to grow our own timber. So in implementing an internship program, we're doing it because we want to grow our own talent. We want to invest in our own talent pipeline. So therefore, it is very key that we also deal with the issues of morale. We also deal with the issues of retention. I would beg to differ with my colleague that the absorption rate is low when it comes to government internship programs. The statistics are actually telling us the opposite. I can tell you right now that since the administration period, if I start from 2014, the administration ending next year, May, we have already placed in government, based on the stats we have, 161,000, of which 50% have been retained into permanent positions.
Mm-hmm. Well, Rudy, we're going to be joined by a different voice now. Actually, Zamo, sorry. We're going to be joined by Rudy Peterson, who is a senior manager of the government and stakeholders relations at the University of Johannesburg. A very good evening to you, Rudy. Thank you very much for joining us. We've been talking about this government recruitment scheme, trying to make the public sector more attractive to young people. What's your opinion on those kinds of internships in the public sector and drawing youth towards them?
Well, I've just read, I was on my way, I've just read the document, and I want to link up with your previous speaker, where he indicated, and I've just seen in the document as well, that government has recruited 161,000 graduates into formal full-time position, and that's a very good start and quite impressive. So I think the growing own timber in South Africa, I fully endorse that. And I think we as the university have can play a pivotal role in that area. I'm from UJ, but I think if this is a national project, I think it's going to be quite, I think there is potential for very, very successful graduate recruitment to meeting, addressing the skills needs in the country. So I want to endorse the previous speaker, and I think given what he said, and I came in on the example he made from investments from foreign investment, but the fact that growing own timber, I endorse that full-heartedly, and I think that we as university can play a pivotal role therein.
And Rudy, how do you think the issues of morale and retention can actually be addressed in the public sector specifically?
Yeah, I'm not sure what I picked up your guess. Is it from the public sector?
It's from the public sector.
But really, that's the big one. I've just read, in fact, as I was walking from the launch today, with my boss, the senior executive director responsible for in our vice chancellor's office, mentioned that government is not an attractive employer, and they need to get that right first. So the issue of morale needs to be addressed, and there's a number of issues here. So we have to go on a very patent, a very concerted effort to be able to address the morale issues as well as the attractiveness of government in a more comprehensive manner, and obviously frame it over a period of time and have a immediate, medium, and long-term strategy with that. But that is the big challenge for government. Is the fact that it's not an attractive employee, and morale with the public sector is at an all-time low.
Well, just coming back to Studio Tsietsi, I mean, let's just say someone has gotten an internship, they've secured an internship within the public or the private sector, and they've worked that sort of a short period. What's the criteria used then by, HR people to decide whether to keep that person now on a more permanent contract?
Okay. Because during that time of, call it a 6 months to 1 year graduate internship, the candidate will be measured, what is called a KPIs, if the person have managed to exceed.
That's the key performance areas.
That's the key performance areas that the candidate is measured on, in terms of and the next career progression that the person wants to take, within a corporate or within a public sector. So the qualifying, criteria mainly that we're looking at, as private sectors, it's mainly your key performance area, you're passionate of the career that you are in.
All right, and now just rounding off the conversation, I just want you to give us a bit of an insight from the youth perspective especially. Why don't they want to work in the public sector? I mean, you've dealt with a lot of young people. Why go private? I mean, people actually would rather, be exploited just for the sake of saying, I worked for this company, I've worked for that company, than to actually go and work for government, which might even pay better.
Let me start by saying that the graduate scheme will actually deal with the perception that is out there. That's why the notion that it should be an employer of choice. Young people feel that in the public sector, they would not grow. That's why as the NYD, amongst other calls that we are making, is that young people must be at the center. Young people must be given positions of responsibility and accountability. Because part of these things is that, like I was saying earlier, that young people occupy your entry-level jobs. You don't find them in the higher echelons of the employ. And that's why most of them, they feel that they can grow much quicker within the private sector. And also, they also say that the incentive is more in the private sector, which now this program will actually try and mitigate to say that come and serve your country with the best quality and skills that you have.
Well, Zama, let me just get closing comments from you in 1 minute.
Well, this is the first move that the government is made following on the directive from the executive, and we've got the support of the minister who is in charge of the public service employment. We, of course, herself getting the directive from the executive, the president himself. So we want to do this not alone, but with partners. One is very encouraged from the support and the weight from the colleague from the NYDA, as we had the colleagues also from the NYDA lending a hand We're working together with another initiative of Youth Employment Service initiative. We work with the Department of Labor, and we've got departments that have already charted the way forward with the schemes that are now solid. We just have to spend the rest of the remaining time to getting it in other departments, which are ultimately the host departments, to expand this, to get it more known to the citizen, general population. And the idea is for anyone out there to know that where to go to if you want to join the civil service.
So partnership is actually a very important aspect. We've gotten that much from you. Rudy, just in 30 seconds, your closing comments.
Again, I didn't get that.
Your closing comments, Rudy, in 30 seconds, please.
Right. No, I think I just want to endorse. I think this graduate recruitment initiative is a bold step by the public service and administration, and I think as a university we endorse this program fully, and we want to work on it and to ensure we participate in its success.
Thank you very much to all our esteemed panelists. That's where we leave it for now. It is time now for a short break. We're back at the top of the hour with mornings and updates, so do stay with us.